Hey guys, welcome. Thanks for joining. I hope everyone is hearing me well. Leo, I see that you joined. Please request so I could promote you to a panel. Leo,
Hey, how are you?
how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah?
Oh, awesome.
Happy.
First time I'm doing
Oh, yeah.
Instagram, so I wasn't quite familiar with the platform as much.
Oh, this is your first time?
Doing an Instagram live, yeah.
Okay. Well, welcome to the baptism.
Thank
Hey, how are you doing? Um, so are you, once you go on Instagram, you just go to our page. Oh, on the account. So if you're able to get on, um, then once you're on, you just go to at CanBWC, which is our Instagram page, and then you could just join the conversation there. And then once you do, you'll just request for me to promote you, and I'll promote you to the speaker stage. But, okay, well, we'll just keep chatting while we wait for you. Okay, correct. Thanks. Hey, Leo, did I lose you?
No, no, I'm here still.
Okay, okay, that's good. Um, just waiting for that was Paula reaching out because she hasn't used Instagram either, so she was just trying to get on.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm promoting. I see Asante joined.
The dread's growing, man.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
It's a pandemic, you know?
I'm looking at you laughing, not just because your hair looks awesome, but then I look at my bald head.
Don't worry, you'll come, you'll come.
Man,
Oh, man.
that's wicked, man. I love it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I was just telling Leo that Paula is having some challenges joining, so we're just gonna give her a few minutes.
Okay.
Has to sort that out.
Yeah, man. Honestly, it took me a while to figure out this IG live thing, you know what I mean?
Oh, for real?
Same here
So
as well.
you haven't done it before either?
No, I've done it before, but I mean, in previous iterations of this, this person couldn't get on, you know? So I had to Google it,
Yeah.
figure it out. But I'm here. I'm good now. I'm good.
All right, wicked, man. Hey, I think this is gonna be the way of the future. So we better like ramp up our knowledge with it and thing.
That's exactly it, man. I can't be that old guy love trying to figure out what's going on. You know what I'm saying?
especially when you got cool hair like that. You can't do that.
Yeah. Hair
Don't
gets
go
a lot of
together.
attention these days.
Yeah, I hear you.
How you doing though, man?
I'm good, man. It's been a grinding day, and then I try to figure out, hey, like 5 minutes before this, let me just prep, and I'm like, damn, I need more time. It's it's good, man. It's really great to like just be in the space having a conversation. Hey,
Honestly, man, yeah, I'm so grateful that you've arranged this for us, and when you reached out to me, it was a no-brainer for me. I'm like, I have to make the time, I have to make the space, I to figure it out. To be joined by the man, them like people like Leo. I mean,
right, Leo.
It's a privilege to be in the room with you, man.
nah, man.
Hey, and so I see, Leo, you're saying you're a transplanted Canadian. So I'm just like, what does that mean? I wanna hear more about that.
That means Grenada is still very much connected to me.
Yeah.
So that identity, top and center, transplanted, but still rooted in Grenada.
Yeah.
Come on, man, it's the best island in the entire Caribbean. Let's not get into it.
Hola.
I know you don't want to go there now.
About to fight now, Leo.
Yeah.
I know, right? When it's spicy, you do it nice, man. Spice, it's amazing there.
Yeah, I hear you. I was just gonna start teasing you about the oil rundown.
It's oil down. It's oil down.
Oil down.
Oil down.
Oil down.
Get it right, man. Get it right, Dave. It's oil down.
Yeah, that's wicked, man. I think I see Paula on now. So let me just send her a request, get her promoted, and we could start rapping a bit. So, but Leo and Asante, am I seeing you guys on Sunday for the Black Men of Excellence walk?
I got the flyer and I had to look in the
Yeah.
closet. I was like, yo, do I even have anything that I could wear to this? But in reality, I think I'll be out of town while it happens. That's the real issue.
That's the real issue.
That's the real issue. Because it's been a minute since I got to pull out the suit from the closet and the flex,
Yeah. I think any suit that you show up in, once you have that here, you're gonna take all the attention from all the rest of the men. Then, so. Yeah. Man. So Leo, you think you're gonna make it out?
No, I would. First off, I don't own a pair of suits. All my formal wear are like African inspired stuff. I don't own a pair of suits. But Sunday as well, I have pre-plans, so I couldn't be there. Deep apology.
No worries. So I see Paula is on, and Paula, I just sent you a request. So if you accept the request, then I could kind of promote you on stage, and then we could get rolling. But Leo, I mean, we could do the African gear too,
Yeah, I love me some African clothing. I don't, it just fits better for me. I feel the ancestors in my African.
So you see me representing, right?
Yep, I saw that as soon as
I hear you.
Notice it, man. I see the artwork you have in the back there too. I mean, over your shoulder.
Yeah.
Very
Totally
nice.
into art, man. Totally love it for sure. So while we're waiting for Paula to kind of formally get plugged in, maybe we could start the discussion and have you guys just introduce yourselves. I know you know each other, so you're probably gonna do a little play off each other, but Asante, we'll start with you, you know,
Yeah, man.
Mr. TEDx speaker, you know, Mr. Human Rights activist, Mr. Change Maker, Mr. Dream Chaser. I want to understand what the Dream Chaser means. And definitely I understand the visionary, you know.
You know what the Dream Chaser is for me is that, you know, for me, I've been an underdog my whole life. So for me, the Dream Chaser is, if you have a dream, whatever it is, it's really about finding whatever you need, the resources to keep going after that dream. So, you know, whether it's hope you need or support or whatever it is, it's like, for me, I find that a lot of us, we kind of give up on ourselves sometimes. So the Dream Chaser for me is kind of, it's all about just, you know, having, and, you know, the Dream Chaser and the visionary go hand in hand for me. So it's having a vision for yourself and chasing it, even though there are going to be barriers and setbacks and all of those things in the way, right? So, I mean, I very strongly connect with that because I started out really low on the totem pole. Like, I mean, I was not the person that I am today in many ways. I was not comfortable with people. I was not a person that I could look in the mirror and be proud of. I wasn't necessarily a person who always treated people well.
Oh, come on, man.
I was broke. I wasn't doing well that way. I wasn't living a healthy lifestyle. So, you know, for me, it's like, you know, the only tattoo that I have, it says every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. So for me, the Dream Chaser kind of represents that, where, you know, it's like you keep trying to build upon yourself and keep improving, and as you do that, your dreams will be closer and closer to you. So that's really what it's about.
Yo, man, I love that, bro. I love that, you know, and I especially kind of love the component around just kind of chasing and make sure it's yours, just kind of having that piece. And you talk about, like, in your bio, you talk a little bit about operating in that intersection between race and mental health. You know, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that before we go over to Leo.
I think that if you are, and you know, for me, they go hand in hand. I can't separate my experience as a Black person in a predominantly white country from mental health, and the reason being is that, you know, ultimately I've just, you know, experienced a lot of discrimination. Obviously doesn't mean that everybody's bad, like, obviously, but you know, there's a certain level of discrimination that I've received, you know, over and over and over again throughout my life. You know, other day, my wife was in a dog park and she's telling me about, you know, how she was there and a young Black woman and her boyfriend got accosted by, you know, a quote unquote Karen, about something that was absolutely ridiculous. Essentially, you know, they were accusing the young Black woman of not being, you know, a proper dog owner and this ray, and then it became this big thing, a whole blow up in the park, and it all started with just this unnecessary intrusion into someone's life. And you know, so I mean, and when you have those kinds of experiences and other kind of experiences, and, you know, I've, you know, seen and experienced and felt things that were, like, hurtful emotionally and physically, like, you know, you know, and I mean, you just can't separate the two. I mean, we'll get into it during the conversation.
I hear you.
But for me, you just can't separate the two.
I hear you, man. You know, I salute you and I appreciate you coming on. And Leo, why don't you next over to you? Like, we talked about the transplanted Grenadian. So, you know, maybe you want to touch on that a little bit again. But you're highlighting yourself as a therapist and a healing educator, and that's a very special combination. And you're trained in culturally adaptive cognitive behavior therapy. That's like a mouthful. I mean, what does that all mean, bro?
Right. Yeah, so big up to the 473, Grenada all the way. Yeah, so You have to. I have to put spice in there. So who am I? So Grenada is. So I came here as an adult in my early 20s, and so my sense of self and my identity is deeply influenced by Grenadian culture. Thankfully, um, I came from a home where both my parents were present and really affirm my entire identity. So I have a type of confidence um, that I'm privileged to hold because of the space that I'm coming from, and because I'm coming from an environment where the lawyers, doctors, teachers, everybody look like me. That sort of reinforced the idea that I can be whatever I want to be. So I call myself a healing educator because the way us Black folks make sense of our mental health and the way we seek out mental health support looks very different to white Canada. And so for me, it was important that I engage in training. So CBT is very Western. The culturally adapted part of it is taking into account the lived realities, the lived experiences, get into it, I'm sure, including trauma that we experience as racialized and Black people.
You know, if I could jump off that.
Guys, let's
Hold on there.
I wanna get Paula plugged in. So Paula is online, but she's having some problems joining. So Paula, if you could hear us, Asante, maybe you could say what did you do to kind of join?
Honestly, I mean, I opened up the Instagram app. I saw that you were live. I click on it, and then in the bottom right corner there was a invitation request, and then I just clicked on the button, and here I was.
Okay, so Paula, I've sent you the invitation request. So hopefully it's sitting in the bottom right hand corner of your screen. And if you just accept it, then you should get promoted on screen here.
Yeah, hopefully Paula could join us soon. As Leo, as you were talking, it made me think, like, you talked about being raised in a place where everybody looks like you. And now for me, I had the opposite experience, right? Because I came to Canada when I was 2 years old. So, I mean, I've been here most of my life. And when I came to Canada, I mean, I came to Toronto, but Toronto was not like the diverse place that it is now. When I came to Toronto, in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, it was still very white. And not just that in terms of the demographics, but it was literally unsafe to be a Black person walking down the street if you didn't have other Black people around you. You just couldn't go downtown. It was like a conversation that we had in my house, a conversation that we had, with my friends, a conversation that, my brothers had with their friends. And a real thing that we had to worry about was, quote unquote skinheads with, the Doc Martens and the, all of those things, right? And so, I mean, there was that component, but also the component of I've never had a Black teacher in my life. I've never had a Black doctor. I've never, you go down the line of profession. I just didn't see it, right? And then you turn on the TV and you watch the Grammys and then you watch the Oscars and you just don't see yourself there. So it's like, where do you fit? And the only place you see yourself are negative viewpoints, right? So, I mean, there's only so much protective factors that you can implement to buffer yourself against the constant barrage of images about yourself that are negative. And eventually it takes a toll on you, and it probably took less of a toll on me than it did with, some of my friends who didn't turn out as well as I have, and so, obviously there's the component of the identity crisis that I think a lot of children of immigrants go through, or people who immigrate young, or you know what I mean. But there's also this, this constant microaggressions, and then you try to stand up for yourself and explain why certain things are not okay, but when you're the only person in the room with that opinion, everyone else thinks that their opinion is the right opinion. They're like, yo, it's just a joke, don't worry, it's okay. you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, it's a form of gaslighting that all of a sudden makes you start questioning, yo, is it actually like just a joke when when they say ABC is African bum cleaner? You know, like, is that just a joke? Or, you know what I mean?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Yeah, man. I love I love to use the term gaslighting. It's just like, you know, the fire just coming because it's just getting ignited. I think Paula is still having some problems joining, so she's gonna sign out and sign back in, and then we're gonna try to promote her. But in the meantime, I just wanna kind of dial it back a little bit to say that, you know, welcome everyone to this month's installment of the Mental Health Hour. September is Suicide Prevention Month, you know, and I wasn't even actually totally aware of that until, you know, our marketing person, Amanda, just, you know, highlighted that. So hail up to Amanda, shout out to Amanda. The reality is that 1 in 5 Canadians face mental health at some point in time in their lives. Yet we don't tend to talk about it. And that's kind of in a large scale, 1 in 5 Canadian. And then when you start talking about being Black, I mean, you know, it gets even more serious and more detrimental than that. So what we're hoping to do is with the Mental Health Hour, we want to break down the stigma surrounding mental health. And, you know, we want to continue to have open discussions and break it down. So this month, we're going to kind of, in this conversation, we're going to focus on mental health. We're going to tie it to Black males, and we're going to tie it to suicide. You know, so happy that I have, you know, Asante and Leo on, and Paula on when she gets a chance to join us. I want to kind of kick off the conversation, you know, to talk about maybe the stigma in the community and why it affects Black males. So, you know, maybe, you know, Asante, I'll kick that one over to you. You know, I think when we talked about sort of this toxic masculinity. And I want you to sort of elaborate on that. And how do we start to make sure that, you know, we better handle and stop the perpetuation that surrounds this piece?
Yeah, you know, I think the masculinity piece is huge. And, you know, when we really dive into it, you know, we can call it toxic masculinity. And for me, how it really manifested was that, you know, what I was told I needed to be in order to be a man was in conflict with the things I needed to do to keep myself healthy and to have healthy relationships. And, you know, I was a very emotional child. You know, like, I was just a sensitive child. It is what it is, right?
So you're saying you're not emotional now?
Well, I am, you know what I mean? But I'm a very emotional
I couldn't let
person.
that one pass.
I'm a very emotional person. I've been that way from the time I was young, right? But, you know, I was the kind of person where, you know, like, if I would lose at a game, I would cry, kind of thing, when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Kind of like dash the Monopoly board to the side. I was that person, right? But you know, as I got older and, you know, I became more aware of the challenges around me and those things started to impact me more and more. I didn't have an outlet, you know what I mean? And you know, what I was seeing around me was, you know, the outlet became, for a lot of the young men around me, the outlet became a few things. It became, you know, I'm going to chase girls. It became, you know, drugs and alcohol. It became, you know, I need to assert my power over others and dominate, which often led to, you know, bullying and violence and things of that nature. And you know, there was no space to be like, yo, I don't feel good because I you know, the things I'm seeing in my community or in my household or whatever, maybe I just don't feel good, like, whatever the reason, like, you know. And when you don't have the opportunity to express that, it's easy to turn that energy inward, and then you start to get the, you know, the depression or the anxiety and those pieces, and, you know, and then you don't have the opportunity to, you know, one of the interesting things about parenting that, you know, I guess I'm, you know, learning now is is that you teach your children how to self-regulate. You teach them how to navigate the world emotionally. So if you have an entire, sex, all the males that you're not allowing them the space to even express their emotion, how can you teach them how to manage them and regulate, right? So if I'm not getting any kind of guidance in terms of my ability to regulate my emotions, I'm just experiencing them very intensely because I was an emotional person, or I am an emotional person, and then things kind of become turbulent. Like, a good analogy, I don't know if everyone's going to get this analogy, but an analogy I like to use is X-Men, like, the comic book, the cartoon, the movie, all of that. So in X-Men, typically these like superheroes, they gain their powers when they're hitting adolescence, right? But the issue is that they don't know how to control them at first, and the powers just come out and they cause damage, and it's wild, and it's not a good situation for anybody. They become maligned, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for me, that was kind of like my emotional experience. It was just out of control all the time. Now in the X-Men, Professor X will come through and work with these young people and help them control their powers and learn to use them for good, but also how to regulate them. If we have, all these men who don't have a Professor X around, regardless of what that Professor X looks like or what identity that person takes, now you just have a whole bunch of men walking around with all this emotion and don't know what to do with it, right? Sometimes that turns outward, sometimes it turns inward, but it's usually not a good place to be if there are challenges in someone's life and things become exacerbated and, it just gets out of control for somebody. But
I love that Professor X analogy, and like I see my boy Duffer's son, Roger Duffer, said he's probably looking at me thinking, "You don't know nothing about this Professor X," because I know he's a big X-Men fan. But the way you've explained it, it makes all a bunch of sense to me, man. And Leo, I just kind of want to transition to you because Asante, you talked about kind of that whole dynamic and the role that culture plays in it. So, Lee, I know when we talked, you talked about how impactful that was. I don't know if you want to kind of pick up on that and start to comment on the role that culture plays.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But just before saying that, though, globally, 510,000 men complete suicide. So that's one man every minute. So in the 24 minutes we've been having this conversation, 24 men globally completed suicide. And when you factor in culture, the idea of Black men, where there's this expectation that as a Black man, you cannot show vulnerability. If you do, you're a wuss, you're a sissy, you're soft, you're weak. And some of that I think is reinforced by the way we parent. Some of that is sometimes reinforced by the women in our lives. And so because Black men don't have the opportunity or they feel stifled in that they're unable to be vulnerable with their emotions, all of them, the soft ones and those that are hard, so being shy and being frustrated and feeling weak and all of that. Because the idea Black man is positioned as this tower of strength, and I think we are, but we also have areas in our life where we're vulnerable, where we need support. So one, being seen as a rock. Two, being unable to really connect with the vulnerability that we hold. And then three, dealing with internal conflict, where what they may want to connect to might be in tension to what is expected. All of those, I think, may be connected, is connected to toxic masculinity. And because it's connected to toxic masculinity, it becomes difficult for Black men to talk about emotions and thoughts and feelings. And I feel like that, in addition to all the other issues that Black men are dealing with, like police violence and all the racism and all the other isms, puts us at a real intersection it means then we're more likely to experience a mental health challenge. Think about it like that, Dave. It's like having a light switch that you constantly put off and on. Every experience of racism, every experience of police violence, every experience of being isolated, microaggression, light switch off and on, off and on. Eventually, that light bulb's going to blow. And so for Black men and for Black folks in particular, because we're constantly dealing with all these external variables and the internal things as well, because we're coming from a place of trauma where our moms and our dads may not have had the opportunity to heal from the hurt, from the abuse, from the violence. And you see how Jamaican culture get passed down. You see the oxtail and all of that hurt get passed down. Similar, our parents pass down the trauma and the hurts and the shame. And all of that get passed down, and it creates a situation where our mental health is incredibly fragile.
That's powerful, man, and I just love the analogy with the oxtail, because I'm sure everybody's gonna be able to sort of relate to that. You know, it definitely passed down. But you know, you said an interesting thing, right? Like the bulb, the light, on and on, what happens when it doesn't blow, right? When it's all bottled up inside and it doesn't blow, like, what happens in that case?
So I'm not sure if it's not blow. I think regardless of whether it blows out or not, the idea is that you would recognize that you want, perhaps incredibly frustrated, maybe very irritable, incredibly anxious about life and about whatever's happening, maybe issues around substance misuse. And so if individuals don't have an opportunity, sort of using the analogy, to at least keep the bulb off or on, meaning to take a pause and to really connect with themselves, it will have an impact. It would have an impact on themselves and the family members and community that they're connected to. So I'm not so sure if it's important whether the light blows or whether it stays on. I think what's more important is recognizing the emotions and the thoughts and the feelings that you have based on the experience that you might be dealing with.
Yeah,
with the light switch thing, I think that eventually it's gonna blow, and either it's gonna blow outward towards somebody or it's gonna blow inward, right? And for me, the light switch blew for me when I was around 14 years old. It didn't mean that, you know, there were necessarily like, I mean, there were some new challenges, but it was mostly the same challenges that I already had, just ongoing. And I just got to a point where I had reached my threshold, and something happened to me, and I just didn't know what was going on anymore. And I just woke up one day, and I just couldn't handle the world around me anymore. I couldn't go outside because I had too much anxiety. I couldn't talk to nobody, too much anxiety. I felt just numb and apathetic all the time. I couldn't feel anything. I didn't get excited for nothing. There was no joy in my life. And then of course you go and you search for that feeling and other things. But I couldn't find it nowhere. But the big thing for me was that I started to just hate myself because I could not live up to the things I was told I need to live up to. But at the same time, I didn't want to there was a part of me that didn't even want to live up to those things. So I was in this conflict of who should I be, right? You know, and you know, am I the person that should I become the person that my mother raised me to be, which is this kind of empathetic, caring, you know, see things from other people's viewpoint kind of person, express
emotional,
et cetera. Exactly, you know what I mean? Right? Because she raised me to be that way, right? Yeah. Or am I gonna be the way of all the OGs who are ahead of me? And you know, I hear the way that they talk and the way that they walk and how they dress, and you know, am I gonna be more like that? And that was very conflicting to me. And you know, I just couldn't reconcile with who I was, but there's also this feeling of I wasn't any of those things while trying to be but not be both of those things at the same time. And because of that, I just felt really caught between places and having nowhere to feel grounded and like steady my feet. And I looked at all of that as my fault, and I just started to hate myself. And of course, once you get there, then I mean, you know, you're in a bad, your mental health is going to deteriorate even quicker,
faster. So interesting, because you're coming from a perspective where it's just like you felt almost lost, right? So
I was lost.
Well, you're lost, right? So how did you recover from that? And I could kind of hear your perspective, your personal experience. But then, you know, Leo, in your cases that you deal with, I'd love to hear when you encounter individuals that are in this space, what advice do you offer to them to get out of that space?
Do you want me to respond now or after Ashante's?
So should I go first?
Let's see. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you know, for me, honestly, I had to get to a certain point where I became strong enough in myself to know that I just started to feel like, yo, I need to be okay with who I am. I just got to a point where I just needed to accept that I am this emotional person, and accept that I am this person with empathy, and accept that, you know, and to stop, I had to come to a mental formulation in my head that even if that meant that I didn't necessarily feel as masculine as I wanted to feel or whatever, that my experience of life was better when I leaned into those qualities that I was raised to have and raised to be than when I was leaning into the other qualities, which usually just led me to relationship discord, stress, you know, and a whole lot of other things that we probably don't have enough time for. So I'm a big believer in do what works. And I realized that the hyper masculine kind of thing, one, it's just not my personality, so it didn't even come across authentic when I tried it. But two, that it just didn't serve me, and I ended up more unhappy and more stressed out, and I was hurting myself, hurting other people, and the other version of myself that I could choose, who was caring, empathetic, and non-judgmental, and open-minded and curious, that led me to far better results in my personal life, professional life, my friends, my relationships, all of that. So it just made sense for me to keep doing that. But, you know, I understand that, you know,
Whatever experience you're dealing with, whatever stress, I often use this analogy of a bus driver. So actually, before I use that analogy, I'll use another. So I'm training something called acceptance and commitment therapy, and it's a lot of metaphors. So I always have a metaphor. So I said to people to think about the weather. So in Canada in particular, snow falls from the sky, hail, rain, the sunshine from the sky stays the sky, it's unchanging, the elements change. And the same with our psychology, the same with our mind. So it's totally fine to experience love, anger, frustration, and joy, to experience pleasant and unpleasant emotions. And we have to give ourselves permission to hold, and that's what I talk to folks with about in my practice. How do you sort of hold all your emotions, all your experiences in a way that can allow you to have what we call psychological flexibility or psychological fun? And so using the bus driver, so the bus, for example, the in bus, the driver is going to a direction, either north or south. And on the bus, all kinds of passengers going to come on the bus. Some perhaps with good hygiene, some perhaps without, some pleasant, some unpleasant, some with bigger bodies, some different color, different, you get the idea. Different passengers come on the bus. The bus driver can't just decide I'm going to stop and not drive. The same with our lives. We have to have what we call a value direction, know what your values are, know what your goals are, and regardless of what shows up in your life, pleasant or unpleasant, you welcome it on board. Welcome in. But what that does, Dave and Shanti, when you allow and you welcome things in, often people can be confused. I can say, I'm unlovable. I'm not a good person. I'm a horrible brother. And then so it becomes deeply fused, deeply connected to that thought. If you welcome it in and you say, I'm having the thought that I'm not lovable, I'm having the thought that I'm not a good brother, it gives you a bit of distance. You're no longer deeply fused with it. And that distance is magic. At that point, you can decide either you want to do something and commit to change, or you just want to continue on the direction you're going, both without judgment and without shame. And so a lot of what I talk about in my practice is allowing people to just embrace the experience as it is, but as well, if they're willing to commit to some step, some actionable thing to bring about some change.
Oh man, that's really powerful. As I kind of listen to you talk, it's almost getting to that point where you're being vulnerable, you're being accepting, and you're in an environment where judgment is not being passed, right? And so for everybody that's on this call, on this live, if we're talking about how do we be better, how do we be better for ourselves, and how do we be better for individuals around us who we know are experiencing trauma? What advice would you give?
Mm-hmm. So that's a good question. And I think because we're talking about Black folks and Black people, we're very much a community-oriented people. And so although mental health is an individual experience, I think there is a collective piece to it. It's a lot like that AA, like having a sponsor. And I think especially these days with COVID-19, each of us, as much as we can, should be a sponsor of people's mental well-being. And that can be checking in, sending a text, making a call, asking what somebody needs, and those things. Self-care, I think, when we think about self-care, often folks think about the spa and all of that. Some people, it's going to a therapist. But for many people in our community, they don't have the luxury to go to a spa or talk to a therapist because we're expensive. And so I think self-care is about recognizing.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, we'll lost you for a little bit.
Yeah,
okay, you're good. You're good now.
Okay, you're good.
Okay, great. Self-care, I think, is a very personal experience. My self-care, you know what I do for my self-care every weekend? So on a Saturday, I love soca music, but only from 3 islands: Barbados, Trinidad, or Grenada, only.
So what about from Jamaica?
Jamaica don't have soca. You guys have dancing. Right? And so my self-care on a Saturday is playing music, because what it does is it takes me to a happy place. It really gets my body moving, the vibration of that, the connection. It feels good. And that feeling good helps. Because remember, mental health is about finding balance in your life. Social, physical, psychological, broadly. And so what I would advise to people, sort of pulling from this author, Audre Lorde, who I a lot, she said, self-care is not about self-indulgence. It is about self-preservation, and that in itself is full of work. So if you need to disconnect, if you need to set boundaries to take care of yourself, you should do that. So that's a very broad question. So for folks, looks very different. It can be setting boundaries. It can be saying no. It can be forgiving yourself when you're having horrible thoughts or you've done things that are terrible in the past. It can be putting yourself first before everybody else. It can be asking for help. I think self-care looks differently for different people. What's important, a person recognizing, am I experiencing some discomfort? And if the answer is yes, the second question is, who can I connect to help unpack? And it can be friends, trusted family. It can be whatever. It doesn't have to be that says, man, But if it gets to that point, I think that's important.
Love that. Self-care is not about self-indulgence. It's about self-preservation. I love that. Asante, can you top that?
Yeah, honestly, man, with Leo, with everything you were saying, I just here like in awe, just listening, taking it in, learning. You know, with regard to self-care, the way that I think about it is, like you said, Leo, self-care is promoted in this, I don't know, it's kind of like, you know, and I hate that I'm about to say this, but like this like rich white woman aesthetic, right? You know, but that's not everybody. Even rich white women don't want to do like, you know, all those things all the time, right? So for me, I look at it like, again, there's this concept of what works and what doesn't. I try to make it very simple. And we all have things in our life that give us joy and bring us peace or bring us meaning, or are fun for us, or whatever it is, right? Now, sometimes those things are things that aren't good for us in the short or long term, and sometimes they are. So I think it's up for each person, like you said, Leo, because everyone's different. I think it's up to each person to kind of list what are the things that I like to do that bring meaning, peace, joy, etc., put me in the flow. Who are the people who help me get there, right? And then assess those actions and assess those people through the lens of what things help me short and long term and what things hurt me short and long term, and keep the ones that help, and, you know, either change or dismiss the ones that aren't helping, and just doing more and more and more of the things that help. So recently for me, you know, being so deep in mental health and crossing as many paths as I cross in this field, because I feel like I'm everywhere these days. But, you know,
Mr. International.
something like that, you know what I mean? but you know, the thing that I had to, you know, go back to is like, what are the things that actually bring me joy and meaning and stuff in my, and I like sports, you know what I mean? Sports is my thing. So like, I know it might seem like a waste of time sometimes for my wife, was like, yo, why are you watching sports all the time, or you know what I mean? That kind of thing, right? Or but for me, it honestly just helps me forget about everything. So yeah, I might be mad because, you know, the pitcher made the wrong pitch and it's a home run and the Jays aren't making the playoffs, right? You know, but
you were vexed too.
Right? You know what I'm saying? But I'd rather be, you know, mad about that than be, you know, thinking about, you know, all the other stress I have in my life sometimes, you know what I mean? But the other thing for me is music, of course. And, you know, I grew up listening to music. Then I became a teenager. You know, I started, you know, making rap music. And at the time it was problematic. But, you know, these days it's a lot, the content is different. But, you know, I don't record music. I still write music. I still, you know, I go up on the rooftop of my, you know, building, and I'm out there when no one's there, and I'll just spit my rhymes to myself, and I'll just do that for an hour, and it just releases that emotion, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, right? But you know, I tried the yoga and I tried the meditation. Honestly, meditation is sick, but for me, there was like a shelf life for that. There's like diminishing returns for me with the meditation. So I had to go back to what were the things that got me through during my worst times, and it was sports, and it was music, and it was video games, and so these are the things that I do now in my downtime. You know what I mean? It's nothing for me to log on to the PS4 and, you know, do whatever I'm doing there, or to turn on the TV and watch the Raptors or the Jays or you know, the whoever. Or you know, to go up to the roof and, you know, write some rhymes and just say them out loud to myself, even though there's no audience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's I think everyone has those things, and we all need to figure out what those things are and just keep doing them.
So we're gonna save 2 minutes at the end for you to spit a rap for.
Nah, man.
No, that's a great point that you made there. I think having like an entire toolbox of things that you can go to take care of your mind and as a self-care practice. What comes to mind for me is if you're trying to walk from your house to your car or to the bus or whatever and it's raining, you might take an umbrella out to keep you dry. But if it's a hurricane and you take an umbrella out, it's useless. And I think that's a way to sort of think about how you connect self-care based on the gravity of the situation you're dealing with. It might be just maybe taking a run, so a physical piece. At other time, when it gets really intense and deep, it might be taking a run, but as well talking about your thoughts and feelings. And I think when we factor in here race and gender in a world that is not so common to Black people, the racism, all of that, it is really important for us Black folks to affirm ourselves daily. I am worthy, I deserve, I'm lovable, what it does is, when we get into this practice of affirmation, and I tell you, for the last, 7 years or so, I practice affirmation daily. And it helps over time. The brain is very plastic, it's very flexible. You begin to believe the things you affirm. And I think it's necessary, given the microaggression, your skin tone is not dark, your hair is nappy, you're not smart, you're violent, you're a deadbeat dad. All these narratives, you have to self-affirm differently. And that as well is self-care.
Man, that's beautiful, man. Deep. a whole lot there to digest. So I want to touch on another topic around just opening up and having conversations. I want to touch on the whole piece around vulnerability, right? And what, so you know, when we were younger in high school, like you could always hold a reason, and you know, you talk about all kind of different things, right? You know, girls, sports, music, whatever. But as you get older, you know, those conversations are happening less frequent, and then they're not happening as deep. So when men get together, right, how do you, or what advice would you give to older men around being vulnerable and opening up topics of conversation that's going to help them be well?
No, Leo, I'm gonna let you take that one because I don't know if I qualify as older man.
I'm sure you qualify for that. I'm sure you have tons of conversation with your brethren them around bedtime. So I'll follow you, Mr. Man.
But you know it's funny you say that because I do actually, you know. But the thing is, somebody had to break the ice because for a long time, nobody was saying nothing. Even me, when I spent many years going out there doing speeches and talking about this and writing articles, I wasn't talking about it with my friends, you know what I mean? But there was a certain point where I don't even know who broke the ice, but one of us did. And all of a sudden, the rest of us found that space where it's like, yo, I went through this when I was in high school. This is how I was feeling. And some of that is, you know, trailing into my life now today, right? Or, you know, the last few years I've been going through this hard time, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know what I mean? And but somebody has to break the ice, I think. And I think, you know, it's not so much about like coaching others to be vulnerable. It's about being the example of vulnerability, and letting people know that it's safe to be these things. And honestly, there have been times where I've opened up and the man just started laughing at me, yo. Right? But then I have to pull back and be like, no, man, it's a real thing. Like, let's get into it. And then, the laugh become a thing where don't even worry about that. Like, I feel you, you know what I mean? And then we get into the conversation, right? So I really think that sometimes it's about, not, I wouldn't say teaching by example, but just being an example to say that.
Leading by example.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's hardly anything to add to that. Like, you killed the question. There's hardly anything to add to that. I think vulnerability is a personal experience. And I think you mentioned the first part is really finding vulnerability for yourself. What does it mean to be vulnerable? And so you have to start again for yourself and be familiar with your own vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And I think as well is really, as you mentioned, just being in the place based on, for some individual, vulnerability might be taking 3 steps forward. For some, it's 10 steps. Very subjective experience. And it is really about you, like you mentioned, recognizing what's happening in your own experience and giving yourself permission to take responsibility for your thoughts and actions as much as you can, sharing that with folks whom I think it would make sense to start with people who you have some trust with. Because if you're being vulnerable and you share with a group that isn't so open, it can sort of be what you call a retreat and not be able to be vulnerable moving forward.
And 2 things that I'm taking from what you're saying right now, Leo, and someone said this in the chat earlier, the concept of self-awareness. But Leo, earlier you mentioned the concept of forgiveness as well, right? And I think sometimes what gets in the way of vulnerability is that honest look at ourselves, right? And either that lack of self-awareness or that unwillingness to be self-aware because we don't want to see what we're going to find, because we don't know if we will forgive ourselves for our shame or our misdeeds or whatever it is. For me, there was a hell of a lot of that, and there's still a little bit of that too that's left over where, but you have to become comfortable with looking at yourself honestly, and it's always going to be an uncomfortable process. That's always hard. You know what I mean? And it doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to do that every day, because there's only a certain amount of mental stamina that we all have. And sometimes you do that hard look into yourself for, a good 2 or 3 months. But you have to take a step back and just kind of live for a little bit. But then you repeat the cycle, and you keep growing and you keep peeling back the layers and you keep improving. And, I find that when you're able to access that self-awareness and then able to forgive and kind of endure the discomfort between the self-awareness and the forgiveness, that it really lays the groundwork for you to be vulnerable first with yourself, like you said, Leo, and then you can extend that outward. But I mean, it sounds simple, but it's hard as hell.
Yeah, it's hard as hell. Well, I know we're pushing up against something that we know where Asante will be watching the Blue Jays.
I just got the alert.
But you probably have to try to get a wrap in before you do that. So let's talk about practical, and as we're sort of looking up, like at the dinner table, or when mans are trying to get together the next time, to be that initiator and to lead by example, what practical steps could we take to start to do that?
Well, I think the first thing we have to talk about, well, not the first thing, but one of the things we need to talk about is language, right? Doesn't mean when we're having this conversation, you, me, Leo, I use certain language because I know between us, we understand the weight of the certain words that we're using. And also there's not a stigma that exists between us around certain words. For me, if I'm talking to my family, my friends, I focus on the events and the experiences and those things more than, I don't walk around saying, dude, let's be vulnerable. You know what I mean? Right? Because that's not going to work, right? It's more like, yo, what's going on? Like, what's really going on with you right now? Like, I'm like, bro, like, I noticed that you're not reaching out lately. Like, is everything okay? So, like, to start the conversation differently than to not start the conversation in a way that's clinical or kind of patronizing or that kind of thing, because I think sometimes when we have these discoveries about like mental health or well-being, or we learn about these concepts and the vibrations and all these things, we want to like give everybody in the world around us all this knowledge, but we have to be cognizant that we can't be everyone's guru, and we shouldn't be everyone's guru. We should be friends and family members first, and then allow those other pieces to slide in. You know what I mean? And then try to make them practical. So it's not like I'm gonna walk around with my friends or my family and again, like, say, hey, let's be vulnerable with each other more. It's more like, hey, maybe we should link up, next week, and let's go this place, or and it could be at a baseball game, but by the time it's sixth inning, we're not even talking about baseball no more, right? You know what I'm saying? But it's just finding easier ways to open the conversation, and language that's less inaccessible, language that's less threatening, language that's less stigmatized, language that's, and when I say stigma, I don't just mean mental health, but like culturally stigmatized as well. And I think to start there, a lot of the work is just doing the work, but you can't do the work if you're not able to, get the door open and allow everyone to feel safe in the conversation.
Totally.
Well said.
Totally. I think language is so important. Often in my practice as well, after session, like the first session, that's what therapy is like. Oh my, I didn't realize it's so dope, and things like that. I think we have to make things really accessible to folks. I think what is also really important is normalizing mental health, recognizing that each of us will, at some point in our life, experience a mental health challenge. We may not have a mental illness, but for sure, at some point, we'll experience mental stress. There is no health without mental health. So you could have the nicest, strongest body, the best looking person. If you're not taking care of your mind, you're a nice looking person with a great body who's broken at 30. So I think a way to normalize that is us personally becoming more vulnerable with our thoughts and feelings. First with folks who we care about, who we trust, and slowly expanding ourselves. I'm a very vulnerable person with my emotion. If I feel sentimental, I'll let you know. If I feel annoyed, I'll let you know. And I feel like the more we normalize this, especially men, perhaps the easier it will become for us men to have conversations about emotions and thoughts. And when we do so, I think perhaps that would help with the mental strain and stress are the folks turning to other means of substance or whatever as a way of escape, when really all to or maybe a hug.
That's beautiful, man. Listen, I think we could continue to have this conversation, but we're at time. It's the beauty. This is the beauty of us connecting, though, right? Because I think what it is that we're creating is, it's not a one-time connection. It's about building relation. Leo, I met you a few months ago. Asante, I met you a few weeks ago. And I feel like at any point in time, I could pick up the phone and call any one of you guys and just hold a reason. And, our objective is to make sure that, us as Black males, that we kind of get to that comfort level. So thank you so much for being part of this conversation. It's your first time, but it won't be your last time. And, we're going to continue to have these conversations on an ongoing basis.
Absolutely.
Right? And I want to thank everybody else for joining, for sharing, for commenting, and to being part of this conversation. And just encourage everybody else to continue to have this open conversation about mental health. And let's all be well and stay well.
Awesome.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Have a great one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.